For 9.2, we have these four issues that were important 60 years ago, they were important 20 years ago, they were important 2 days ago. They'll be important 2 years from now and 2 weeks from now. In the Middle East, which is most important to consider when doing anything? Is it the necessity that the world has for oil? And there's so much oil in the Middle East. Is it the Jewish people and after 5,000 years of oppression and the Holocaust that they should be protected at all costs? Is it the neighborhood, as I call it? Is it, sort of the nuclear power that's emerging and the civil wars and all of that? Do we need to be most concerned about that? Or the issue of self-determination, something we've talked about all year. And in class, you all had very compelling arguments for why each of these issues should be most important. And that's the issue. They are all important. It is incredibly difficult to choose just one when making any sort of decision in the Middle East. So we're skipping ahead till 1967. Israel was nearly 19 years old. They turned 19 in May of 1967. And the hit song that spring was called Jerusalem of Gold. If you look back at your maps and where the nation of Israel was from 1949 to 1967, Jerusalem was split. Part of the city was held by that Arab-Palestinian control, and only part of it was held by the Jewish nation of Israel. The song Jerusalem of Gold talks about how important Israel is to Jewish history and Jewish culture. And the people of Israel just sort of feel this longing that they want Jerusalem back, and they don't have it. So this is sort of the undercurrent. And then some events start happening. There are reports of troops on Sinai. Remember, the Suez Crisis, the Suez Canal had been closed in 1956. Israel fights back and demonstrates that they will defend themselves. Egypt had started getting their army ready. They were doing, training exercises on the border, which always looks very sketchy. The Egyptian leader is Abdel Nasser. So we've got the Egyptian army sort of mulling about, and then Nasser closes the Suez Canal to Israeli shipping. So repeating the same issues that we saw in 1956 with the Suez Crisis. This will lead to what's known as the Six-Day War. So here we see the borders in 1967. When Egypt closes the shipping and has the troops sort of milling about, looking very, very sketchy, this will lead to where Israel will defend itself. It is really 6 days in June of 1967. The Israeli Air Force, which is incredible, rather than waiting to be attacked, because all of the signs are there, the Israeli Air Force attacks first. It's called a preemptive strike. Rather than waiting to be attacked, they attack first. Because if they look at their recent history, they know that this will just hurt them if they allow Egypt to be aggressive like this. So then Egypt engages its army and sends troops into the Sinai. But it's now not just Egypt. They get the help of the neighbors. In Syria, the Syrian army sends troops at the Golan Heights. But wait, there's more. Jordan sends troops at the West Bank. Israel is entirely surrounded. And this is exactly what they feared. And I was just browsing and I happened to come across this on Wikipedia, which I think so perfectly encapsulates one of Israel's biggest issues. It's Israel against everyone. These countries, the Arab League nations, hate that Israel exists. However, due to that mandatory military service and the understanding that if they lose, they will cease to exist, Israel wins. Israel wins this war, even though they are surrounded, and they gain new territory. So here we see how the map changes. The territories in orange, dark orange, that was the territory that was Israel. And then as a result of the Six-Day War, look at all the territory they gained. They gained the Golan Heights. They gained the West Bank. They gained the Gaza Strip. They gained the Sinai Peninsula through their military prowess. This is really significant, especially because it means that Jerusalem is now open to the Jews. These are Israeli paratroopers seeing the western wall of the temple for the very first time, one of the most holy sites in Jewish culture and religion. Not everybody is thrilled, however. There's quite a bit of controversy, one about the preemptive strike. If you think about when you fight with your brothers and sisters, and he started it first. Well, in this case, because Israel attacked first, the world sort of sees them as the instigator. They started it. Israel's argument is we were just defending ourselves. We could see what was coming. They closed off our shipping, and their army was on our borders. Another issue is just all of the land that they've taken, because all of the people who live in that land are primarily Arab, those Arab Palestinians. Thousands and thousands of these Arabs who now fall under Israeli control. And they don't really like that too much. So a group is created, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, or PLO. And their stated goal is to free the Palestinians. Now note that their goal is not to create a state for the Palestinians. They really haven't demonstrated any desire to create a country in the way that the Israelis did. But they simply do not want to be part of Israel. They don't want to be under Israel's control. And there is a video about that. And this is their leader, Yasser Arafat. And the Palestinian Liberation Organization uses these crazy tactics like an angry teenager, like an angry toddler, to get attention. They want the world to pay attention to them and say, hey, look at all these people who are under Israeli control. And this is in the late 60s and early 70s. In the 70s, the leader of Israel is Golda Meir, one of the first female heads of state, which is pretty significant. And she had been instrumental in creating Israel. And David Ben-Gurion, the first prime minister, thought she was the best man in the government, which sounds a little sexist, but it's supposed to be a compliment. And even though she seems like this sort of mild-mannered old grandmother, she is going to be very strict in accomplishing what needs to be accomplished for Israel, for the Jewish people. One thing that characterizes her term of office is the PLO and all of these things that they're doing to get attention. So things like hijacking planes, getting international attention to the plight of the Palestinian people under Israeli control. And probably more famously, in 1972 at the Summer Olympics in Munich, 11 Israeli athletes are kidnapped and killed by sort of this splinter group of the Palestinian Liberation Organization. The movie Munich, directed by Steven Spielberg, is about what Israel does in response. That Mossad, which is the sort of Israeli secret service or security agency, they track down everyone who was involved and kill them. And the world is a bit critical of this, if that's too harsh, but Israel feels that they must do whatever is necessary to ensure their survival. They know that everyone hates them. They know they are surrounded by enemies. In the 1970s, we see the U.S. and Russia again sort of choosing sides. The U.S. had said that they would help Israel, and Russia had been helping Egypt. In particular, they had been sending scientists to Egypt, and in the 60s and 70s, scientists are working on atomic weapons, nuclear weapons. This makes Israel very nervous. This takes us to the Yom Kippur War. And Yom Kippur is the holiest day on the Jewish calendar. It is the Day of Atonement, the day when you get forgiveness for all of your sins for the entire year, and then you can begin the new year fresh. It is the day that all Jews would have been at the temple or synagogue in preparation for this holiest day. And it starts on October 6th, 1925, and Egypt is a little upset at the territory that they lost in 1967 and how much they were whooped in 1967. So they see this as their chance to get back some of that territory. So Israel is attacked by Egypt and again by Syria. So two fronts. Syria wants to get back the territory in the Golan Heights. Once again, Israel kicks butt. Even though they're at a disadvantage because the entire country is sort of powered down, nobody's at the ready, they still win. They still fight back because they know if they lose, they will cease to exist. So the United Nations again steps in when it becomes clear that Israel has won, and the United Nations brokers the ceasefire. But even if you look at the numbers, not just the heart that Israel has, but the numbers, that they have half as many resources and they still win, this is really, really impressive. So at the end of the Yom Kippur War, Egypt finally realizes, okay, we've tried 3 times. We tried at the Suez, we tried at the 6-Day War, we've tried again, and we have lost all 3 times. Maybe it would be more beneficial to start talking about peace. Rather than fighting Israel, maybe we need to negotiate. And because Egypt is willing to negotiate, they are kicked out of the Arab League. They're kicked out of the neighborhood club that has been attacking Israel this whole time. This new understanding in Egypt will lead to peace talks, the most famous of which are called the Camp David Accords. Now you can see here, we've got Israel and we've got all the territories that they gained in 1967. With the Camp David Accords, and it's named after Camp David, which is sort of the weekend retreat for the American presidents in the mountains of Maryland. Egypt and Israel talk, and it's sort of negotiated or brokered by President Jimmy Carter. Israel starts to talk about, okay, maybe we can give back some of this land. This is a huge deal that we have Israel talking with Egypt, these two enemies talking rather than fighting, and Israel agrees to, maybe start giving back some land. This will lead to the Egypt-Israel Peace Treaty in 1979. So what happens is Israel says, we will give back the Sinai Peninsula. Let's go back to the map real quick. We'll give back the Sinai Peninsula, and that they'll talk about self-governance for the people in Gaza and West Bank. So massive progress. For this, the leaders of Egypt and Israel are given the Nobel Peace Prize. And the United States commits money to both countries. So we don't want to choose sides, we just want peace in the region. So they have all of these nice goals, they've talked, but goals are different than action. They will continue talking, these countries, Israel and Egypt, or Israel and the Palestinians, but talking doesn't really accomplish anything for the people on the ground. So starting in 1987, this thing called the Intifada, and this is a word that means uprising. We have Palestinian civilians who are still upset at being controlled by Israel. They start fighting back. So we have civilians fighting against a country because they are so upset, and we have civilians throwing grenades and all of these things. Not good stuff. This will lead to a new round of peace talks, the 1993 Oslo Accords, again brokered by the Americans. So here we see the Israeli Prime Minister, this is Yitzhak Rabin, and there's Yasser Arafat once again. Okay, let's talk about peace. We don't want to fight. We don't want to live in a system of ongoing violence. And so they talk about how do we get peace, and maybe what should we do about a future Palestinian state, perhaps giving these people self-determination. One major issue is throughout all of this, in that territory that Israel took and gained and won in 1967, there have been Jewish settlements, meaning Jewish communities have been built on the land in the Gaza Strip and in the West Bank because they say, hey, we won it fair and square in war. We're going to start building our lives here. So this is sort of encroaching on the Palestinians who feel that this territory should be theirs. So this is where sort of things stand, where we have the nation of Israel, and then we have these occupied territories of the Gaza Strip and West Bank, and even to an extent the Golan Heights. In the late 1990s, Israel proposes what they call land for peace. That they say, okay, we're tired of fighting. How about this, Palestinians? They offer almost 90% of that territory in sort of that darker mustard color. We will give you back the land if there will be no more fighting. We don't want to fight. Now, Israel wants all of this. They feel that all of this belongs to them, but they are more interested in peace. The problem is the Palestinians say, no, it's not good enough. And this leads to the beginning of the Second Intifada in 2000, a second uprising. But what's different about this uprising, it's not just the civilians, but it's sort of terror organization, groups that are supported by other countries inciting the violence. So groups like Hamas in the Gaza Strip, or we have Fatah in the West Bank, or Hezbollah in Syria. We have these groups supported by the neighboring countries. They are launching missiles from their territories into Israel. This is an Israeli kindergarten that was attacked, so civilians are being targeted. A really good way to get civilians is get a crowded city bus or the local neighborhood pizza joint on a Saturday night and send a suicide bomber in. So this is really, we really start seeing suicide bombers during the Second Intifada. With this widespread violence, again, leads to new talks. Lots of talking, not lots of action. It's called the Roadmap for Peace. And again, brokered by the American president, this time George W. Bush. And what they're saying is, okay, we need to stop the violence, and the settlements are the issue. These Jewish Israeli settlements, these neighborhoods in the West Bank, in the Gaza Strip, those will need to be evacuated in order to give the Palestinians a chance at their own country. So there's two perspectives on this. This is the Palestinian perspective, is they say, before 1948, we had all of this territory. Look at all of the green. We had all of that. There are a few Jewish settlements, that's it. And then with the partition plan, we lost a chunk. And then with the creation of the State of Israel, we lost even more. And then through the 6 Days War, through increasing settlements, look at how little we have. That is a valid argument. But here is the Israeli perspective. Look at 1967. Look at all the territory that we conquered through legitimate ways because we were defending ourselves. Look at what we have given back. We gave back the Sinai Peninsula. We have given back so much of the Gaza Strip and West Bank. Valid perspective. These two groups will probably never agree. And with the settlements, I mean, this still to this day is an issue. You have these suburbs, Jewish people, Israelis, living in these suburbs in the occupied territories. And they've now lived there for 20, 30 years. But the Israeli government, a few years ago, in the interest of trying to find peace, they actually force Israelis out of the settlements. They force them to leave. They say, you know, this isn't great. We know for thousands of years we've been forced to pack up and leave, and you have to do it again. I'm sorry. But this is the only chance we have for peace. Then we have the Palestinian side that says, not only do we want you to evacuate, we want our own country. We don't want to be occupied. We want to have our territory back and have our own system. So this issue of self-determination comes up once again. However, the violence still continues. Israel is attacked on a daily basis from these other territories, sending missiles into Israel. And so Israel has developed a system called the Iron Dome. And it's this high-tech computer system that intercepts the missiles in midair before they can land on Israeli territory and kill Israelis. It's really, really cool, really high-tech. But it's sad that it's necessary because this tension still exists. So I don't know, there will possibly never be a solution because there's all of this tension.